Joe Biden is confused. The world is in the middle of the catastrophic Israel Hamas war, but Joe Biden doesn't know which side to support. The President of the United States has flip-flopped and backtracked on his support for Israel since the war began on October 7th of last year. And now this inconsistency is leading many to question Joe Biden's abilities as a stable and competent leader, particularly in the lead up to the November election. Sky News All Stars Ami Horowitz, Morrow and Douglas Murray peel back the curtain to discover the real reason behind Joe Biden's confusing stance on the Israel-Hamas war. Joe Biden came out fighting in total support of Israel in the immediate aftermath of the October 7th attacks by Hamas. But since the war has raged on and support for Palestine has strengthened among young Americans, Joe Biden's stance has become political. He's well aware that an election is looming and he doesn't want to alienate potential voters. Sky News All-Star Ami Horowitz explains.
Yeah, and Ami, tell me though about this, because it seems like the White House has now created this situation where they've got a huge problem if they go too hard or don't go hard enough on Israel with voters in places like Michigan, but they've got a huge problem with these campus protests if they go hard on Israel, don't go hard enough on Israel. It seems like they've created this huge dilemma for themselves now, and it's entirely muddled. And as long as these protests keep going on, I would think that ordinary Americans are thinking, geez, I don't want to be anything involved with these people.
Yeah, never mind the moral issue involved with not taking a stand to stand with Israel. Just from a political perspective, it was a massive, massive mistake and miscalculation, right? So initially he said, okay, I'm going to stand with Israel because, frankly, I do believe that's where the president's heart is. But when he came to realize that, oh, God, the margin of error is so small when it comes to Michigan and Georgia and Minnesota, I better flip on my morals for political expediency. But guess what? It was a massive mistake politically because these people are already aligned against Biden. None of these people, no matter how hard you go against Israel, he has gone against Israel hard to the hoop, are going to come back to the party. I recently did a video, we haven't released yet, and I asked these protesters, who are you going to vote for? Every single one of them said they will not vote for Biden. In fact, they said they've lost, the Democratic Party has lost them forever. And if I went further, and they were comparing, and this is not a joke, they were comparing Joe Biden to Hitler. He is so far gone from getting these people to vote, yet he's still kowtows toward them. He's still trying to cravenly trying to get their votes, even though they won't vote for him. And in the process, he's throwing Israel under the bus.
Joe Biden was talking tough on Iran as recently as a month ago, simply saying don't, when warning Iran not to attack Israel.
What is your message to Iran in this moment?
Don't.
Are American personnel and assets at risk, Mr. President? Mr. President, are American troops at risk as well?
We are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel. We will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed. Thank you very much.
But since then, his rhetoric and actions have been a constant flip-flop between supporting and condemning both sides. Joe Biden has come out in the last few days showing sympathy to Israel, rejecting ICC claims that Israel is committing genocide.
We just had the US president respond to that news. Joe Biden spoke a short time ago, reaffirming his support for Israel. He's rejected claims the war in Gaza is genocide.
Let me be clear. We reject the ICC's application for arrest warrants against Israeli leaders. Whatever these warrants may imply, there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. And it's clear Israel wants to do all it can to ensure civilian protection. But let me be clear. Contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice, what's happening is not genocide. We reject that. We will always stand with Israel.
He also maintained support for Israel at a speech to Jewish people celebrating Jewish American Month in Washington.
Going live to Washington, D.C., Joe Biden is speaking. He has spoken out. He's at the Jewish American month event there, and he's spoken out against this ICC arrest warrant. This is for Hamas leaders, but also for Israel's Prime Minister. And so these arrest warrants going out, and Joe Biden has condemned this action. The overall US government stance is should not be putting these two on the same footing, effectively. Let's have a listen in to the president.
Celebrating heritage and legacy of Jewish Americans who continue to enrich every single part of our life. So thank you for what you've done for America and for the whole world to make it a better place. May the Jewish people shine their light and shine the light on the world for generations to come, because we need you badly. God bless you all, and God protect our troops. Thank you for being here.
However, this comes after Joe Biden didn't mince words earlier this month when he threatened to withhold weapons from Israel, says Sky News All-Star James McPherson.
Well, let's go to Gaza, where Israel are considering an invasion of Rafah, which is pretty important because that's where the Hamas leadership are. So to defeat Hamas, you've got to go into Rafah. That's where the hostages are being held, and that's where 4 military battalions of Hamas are stationed. So I don't know that if Israel want to defeat this terrorist organisation, they have much choice. But get this, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, is telling Israel if they invade Rafah, the US will withhold weapons and ammunition from their allies. So you've literally got a situation where the US President is acting to save a terrorist organisation no less than murdered and raped US citizens, and continues to hold at least 5 US citizens as hostages right now. Kayla, this strikes me as a really dangerous move for so many reasons. Number one, it rewards Hamas for holding people as human shields. Number two, it endangers Israel because Israel, if Joe Biden hadn't noticed, are currently at war on numerous fronts. And America are now telling all of Israel's enemies, we may not continue to arm Israel, which would fill you with confidence if you're Hezbollah, for instance, or the Houthi rebels. And then third, doesn't this decision spook every US ally? I mean, here we are down under thinking, you know what, if China attack, the US will come to our rescue. But Joe Biden has just informed all of his allies domestic politics trumps our commitment to allies. So you'd be thinking twice before you rely on America, wouldn't you?
Well, it may well be the first war in the Middle East that the US has not seen fit to go and get involved with.
And Sky News All-Star James Morrow made Joe Biden's changing positions on Israel even more clear, with a direct comparison between his stances 10 years apart.
And today, we're going to play a little game of compare and contrast. I'm going to play 2 clips, one of Joe Biden 10 years ago, and one from just the other day. First, Joe Biden speaking on the topic of Israel in 2014. Let's go.
It's more than merely a moral obligation we have. It's a security necessity. It's for both Israel's sake and for the United States. The security of Israel and the United States is inextricably tied. And we will never, ever, ever abandon Israel out of our own self-interest.
I mean, you can just see how much the man has declined looking at him 10 years ago and now. Could you imagine the president trying to even pronounce the word inextricably today? But now, let's look again at Joe Biden speaking to CNN just a few days ago on the same topic, Israel.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. It's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah, artillery.
So much vigor there. Now, 2 things stand out pretty obviously from these 2 clips. Number one, there's the incredible decline, of course, in Joe Biden's vigor, his mental acuity. The man has aged and been aged incredibly by the office and time. But 2, the more important thing, I think, for our purposes is the huge backflip when it comes to Israel. Threatening the government of Israel that the U.S. would withhold aid, and this is key, if they go into Rafah in the Gaza Strip to finish off Hamas.
Presidential nominee Donald Trump also realized Joe Biden's backflip, condemning him for taking the side of terrorists.
Donald Trump said as much and more in the past few hours, posting on Truth Social. Crooked Joe Biden, whether he knows it or not, just said he will withhold weapons from Israel as they fight to eradicate Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Hamas murdered thousands of innocent civilians, including babies, and are still holding Americans hostage, if the hostages are still alive. Yet Crooked Joe, Trump says, is taking the side of these terrorists, just like he has sided with the radical mobs taking over our college campuses because his donors are funding them. Biden is weak, corrupt, and leading the world straight into World War III. Remember, this war in Israel, just like the war in Ukraine, he says, would never have started if I was in the White House, Trump said. But very soon we will be back and once again demanding peace through strength. That was Donald Trump.
Sky News All-Star Douglas Murray also slammed Biden's erratic backflips.
But let's stick with the Biden White House, their incoherent and inconsistent decision-making. Douglas, you've written about this, about how the president says something that's very sound 1 minute, and the next day he does something that's completely at odds with that. You talked about the wise words he said last week about Israel. And then within hours, he was attempting to prevent Israel's victory in Gaza by withholding arms shipments. How do you explain this erratic behaviour?
Well, it's very strange. I mean, the best interpretation of it is for some time, and you and I have discussed this before, Rita, for some time the president has talked a bit of one talk and acted in another way. Now, for those of us who want Israel to win in Gaza against Hamas, sometimes, you know, that's the rhetoric has been unpleasant, but the actions have been supportive. So, for instance, at various times, President Biden, we presume, has sent out, for instance, Chuck Schumer to be critical of the Israeli reaction. Occasionally, Joe Biden has been critical himself, but he's done that in order, it seems, to placate a bit of the base in his own party, keep the students from going bananas all the time on campus, and hope to get in November, whilst at the same time supporting America's ally, Israel. The thing that was different this past week has been that it flipped exactly the other way around. The rhetoric from the president on the day was very good, very supportive, all about standing by our allies and all that sort of thing. And then in the evening, he stopped the delivery of arms supplies to Israel. Now, that is a very serious development, because a lot of the sort of the talk, the chaff of the media cycle, particularly in America, you know, is performative. It's for the base. It's for a certain bit of the base. It's for the 3 or 4 people watching some of the smaller left-wing networks. But the really difficult thing here, as I say, is that he actually did something which he had always said he wouldn't do. He's always held himself out as a great ally of Israel in its fight for survival and its fight for victory over its enemies. And here he is in charge in the White House, withholding arms at a time when Israel is pretty close to victory against Hamas. How you can say you're an ally and you're with someone till the bitter end, only to drop out at about last orders, I just do not know.
So, what's the real reason behind all of these backflips? James Morrow says it's political.
Trump just a few hours ago, but there is, even beyond all of this, with this backflip on Israel, a bigger issue that we need to get into, and that is why Biden made this move. And I think the reasons why this move were made are obvious for all to see, because in doing so as well, he may have landed himself, Joe Biden, in some trouble. Indeed, some analysts are now saying that this could be, and would certainly be more likely if the parties were reversed, an impeachable offense, given that the likely reason Biden withheld the aid was to help not American foreign policy or national security interests, but to assist the Democrats in the unenviable task of shoring up the Muslim vote in key states like Michigan, where U.S. support for Israel has voters furious.